Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose, the #1 health podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every single one of you who come back every week to listen, learn, and grow. Now, you know that I am so deeply committed to wanting to serve and support each and every one of you. And today I'm getting to sit down with not only a dear friend, but a phenomenal author who has written a brand new book that is going to help you on your personal path to power. Her name is Dr. Shefali, and her new book is called A Radical Awakening: Turn Pain into Power, Embrace Your Truth, and Live Free. Dr. Shefali, welcome to On Purpose.
Thank you, Jay.
And I'm so excited to be back with you. Thank you for coming in person. I'm so grateful.
Of course, I couldn't miss the opportunity.
No, like we've been friends for 5 years now. So the first time we met was when we tweeted each other. And I remember we were both like, this person looks like me. And we were messaging away. And then when me, you, and my wife are together, people were like,
goodness.
What's going on here?
I know. Unfortunately, they always call me your aunt. And
No, they
like,
don't.
How is your nephew, Jay? And I go...
No, they don't. But honestly, you were one of the first people to ever reach out to me when I first started my journey and helped me so much, supported me so much, encouraged me so much. And I just saw you, writing 3 New York Times best-selling books. You're Oprah's favorite parenting expert. I mean, just so many great accomplishments. And today we're talking about your new book. And you've been sharing with me a little bit. And with my research, we've been talking about how this is dedicated to women.
Yes.
To find their power.
Yeah.
Tell me about why this was the right book right now.
Well, not only because it was the emblem of my own personal finding of power, but we women, and not to denigrate men, but we really are the container, the nurturing emblem for our children. And because we primarily raise our children, we're the connectors, we are the nurturers of the earth. We carry the feminine principles so strongly within us that if we are subjugated, as we are today in the toxic patriarchy that we live in, then there is no hope for our planet. So I wrote this book to awaken us women, to ignite our own sovereignty so that when we step into it, the earth can heal.
I love this already because there's a few things that come to mind. And I know you beautifully weave together Eastern principles and, you're a therapist and modern psychology and science. Tell me a bit about how do you think women's power has been dampened and weakened over time? And what have we lost as a society because of that?
Oh my goodness. So I imagine that pre-recorded history, women held a more powerful, pedestalized place. So this is my fantasy of that time. However, since recorded history, especially since the last 10,000 years of the agricultural revolution and then the industrial revolution and our modern digitized technological revolution, with each passing of era, if you notice, sociologically, we have moved away from the earth, so to speak. And you can see now we're living in a virtual reality. What does that mean? Our intimacy within the tribe, within the community, within the shared space of the earth, other species, and us, that connection is being severed. We are so far removed now from real reality. I mean, we literally can see reality in a helmet. We don't have to go there. What do we lose with each pivotal turn away from these connections? We lose our connection to ourselves. With each movement away from the earth, our mother, we move away just like a child grows up without its mothering. So in the same way, a child who's brought up in an orphan is disconnected from its mothering, we as a humanity are moving away from our mothering, right? I mean, it's clear. We have damaged the earth. We have destroyed the planet. So with this movement away into masculinity, now masculinity is beautiful. I talk about how we women who are so embedded in our feminine need to embrace the masculine. But when the masculine becomes extreme, as we are right now in a toxic masculinity, what happens is that we force the beautiful feminine into a toxic femininity. So we are at extreme polarities. And through Eastern meditation, dualism is a curse. So we're living in a polarized world, in a dualistic world, and we've cut women from their power because it's a toxically masculine world, which doesn't favor the feminine. And we women are in our feminine. So in a very microscopic level, let's just bring it down to my family, my child, what happens in the home. We women are taught to relinquish our inner voice. So within the patriarchy of the culture, there's another patriarchy, which is in the parenting, which is what I talk about, right? Parenting is patriarchal, hierarchical, dogmatic, and linear. So just between parent and child, even mother and daughter, there is a denigration of the daughter's spirit, even by the mother, because she is subsumed in the bigger patriarchy. So this linearity and hierarchy is toxic. So I've been talking about conscious parenting as a whole being subjugating of children. Now take that and put it within a toxic patriarchy. The girl child in particular, the daughter, is really now at the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
Then the girl child of color is even at the, so we are living in a very stratified culture, and it all goes down and affects me in my daily life.
Yeah.
So even me, educated, PhD, I was being swallowed in my own lostness. So that's when I woke up in my 40s, no earlier, to realize that if I am lost to my own inner knowing and I'm laying vanquished to my own power, what must it be like for others? And that's why I wrote this book. Each one of my books is really ignited by my own journey, as I'm sure yours is, because until I feel it and until I've lived it, I can't teach it.
Yeah.
So I really uncovered my own lostness to find my foundness. And this book really speaks to how every woman and man can reclaim their lost voice. We have lost our true, authentic voice as women, as a culture, as a species, and our earth is losing its voice. It's everywhere. I mean, this is a wake-up call, a crisis in humanity, but there is light if we wake up to the light. And so this book speaks about that journey from darkness to light and how each one of us can find our light.
Yeah, I love hearing this from you. And I mean that genuinely, because I remember when I got married, and we were just talking about it was just 5 years ago, but I've been with my wife now for about 8 years that we've been dating and together. And in our culture, when a woman is invited into a home, it's considered like you're inviting a goddess into your home, right? Like Lakshmi Devi or Saraswati Devi. That's actually the culture.
Right.
And that's actually the mindset, is that you're actually allowing this abundant goddess to come into your home.
Right.
That's what it's meant to be.
Right.
But often it's not translated in that way in actions and behavior.
Yes.
And I know that in my own way, I can tell that when I've allowed and when I've worked with my wife to allow her abundance and to allow her to be her best self and her true self, it's like the most beautiful bond you can experience. And if I ever get lost in the idea of control or taming or, like just if you're trying to contain is the right word, as you said, like if I see myself having any of that, which is not, I'm actually not like that at all, but from society and what you hear, if I ever see myself trying to become a container of that energy, it actually loses its power and beauty.
Right.
And that can be as simple as loving my wife's spontaneity to her actually being fulfilled. Does any of that make sense?
Absolutely. So women have been bridled because of these institutions. So in this book, I talk about how marriage, once a contract, now has become an engagement, and where women are talked about as possessions and as objects of control. And so if you veer out of that contract, especially in cultures like ours, heavily patriarchal and unconscious, then the woman is really derided. And so she's lost. So her only two options are to suffer and stay, or to face ostracism if she defies the norm. So institutions that we have created under this toxic patriarchy have begun to engage us. And until we reframe what marriage really means, and, I just went through a divorce, so I had to reframe what divorce meant, and the fears that came about because of my fear of ostracism really challenged me and made me realize that we can't do this to our women. We are not property, and we need to be allowed to be unbridled in our power to live free. So these institutions are designed for ownership and possession and control, including parenting, including education. All these institutions that we've created suffocate the true spirit. And with the demise of the authentic self comes the demise of each other, and then the demise of the earth. What is done to us, we do to others.
Absolutely. I love how you were speaking about at the beginning, like Mother Nature, and how that disconnection is the disconnection from the feminine energy. But also, even as a man, when we're suffocating that energy, we actually also don't get to experience it beautifully and deeply and wonderfully.
Right.
Like that's from looking at it from a masculine perspective. It's like if I'm stifling or suffocating feminine energy, then I actually don't get to experience the essence of how amazing it is.
Right. Because in order for a traditional male, to allow his feminine wife to be blossoming in that energy, and to have the woman to have masculine energy as well, takes the man to now explore these aspects within themselves. So that is threatening for men who don't want to do the inner work, and they don't want to touch the vulnerability that brings. So they now get denied from that beautiful process of growth themselves. So this book really is not only an invitation for women sitting on their couch right now, feeling dislocated in their lives, feeling disenfranchised, feeling scared to open up to their power. But in doing so, they now challenge the men in their lives to now integrate themselves.
Yeah. Let's talk about those women that you're just mentioning. I'm sure a lot of them are listening to this podcast or watching us right now, and they're listening to you and saying, Dr. Shefali, I'm in one of those marriages right now, or I was raised in that way, or maybe my parents still control my life and make my decisions for me. Where does that person start their radical awakening? Like, what is the beginning? As you say in this book, you build the path. Tell us about that first step for someone who is like listening to you right now and saying, I get it. I'm there.
This book really speaks to that lonely, desolate place that all of us have experienced until we break free. We've all experienced desolation of the spirit because we've been disconnected. Our parents controlled us. We grew up with a prescription list. We were raised to be people pleasers, good girls, skinny girls. We women, if we're honest, have been raised with such a standardized prescription list, of how to be. And brown girls, black girls, we're all raised to be following the standard of beauty, the standard of goodness. And we've been suffocated. Our fathers may have done it, the culture may have done it, but now we do it to ourselves. So the radical awakening that I talk about in this book is first about understanding what has been done to us by culture and our parenting, our early childhood, and then what we do to ourselves. So now we do it to ourselves, right? We look in the mirror and we look at our big earlobe and we objectify ourselves and denigrate ourselves. We look at the wrinkle here. Nobody's looking at it now. But because it was done to us, we do it to ourselves. Because they suffocated us, now we suffocate ourselves. So for the woman out there who's sitting there knowing that she's living in fear, that she's faking it, that she's lying to her partner, that she's being inauthentic, I would tell her that there is a path out of this. I was one of those women who was living a role, pleasing everyone around me just to keep everyone happy. So for that woman, I would tell her that it is scary because she's waking up to the realization that her life has been false. She's been living in a false, fake self. And that's scary. But now, so she looks ahead and she sees a tunnel, like, who am I without the role? Who will I be without being the mother, the wife, the daughter? But as she goes through this tunnel, and this book is an accompaniment with her in that tunnel, step by step, then after the darkness of the tunnel, there is, of course, light at the end. There's no tunnel that is interminable, but it feels like it's never ending. But I want that woman to know that every woman has felt like that before she's undertaken the greatest journey of her life. And the greatest journey of her life will take her to the reclamation of her true power. And it's worth taking that journey.
I mean, it just sounds necessary. I mean, I'm not a parent yet, and I don't have a daughter, but I would want anyone in my life to feel like they got to live their true self and release their power. I just think that I think people as a whole are so much more beautiful when they're getting to live their purpose and their power.
Yes.
They're more attractive to themselves and to other people.
Yes.
And I don't mean attractive on a physical basis.
Yes.
I mean energetically attractive. Like
yes.
you notice when you meet someone
Yeah.
who is experiencing that personal connection to that power. When you, and if you feel comfortable sharing, when you were battling, going through the divorce and feeling ostracized, like, or experiencing that, what was the hardest part about that?
You know, Jay, you and I growing up in India in particular, which has facets of the extremes of toxic patriarchy, know better than anyone what pressure women have to keep the home happy and safe and protected, you know, and keep it away from the judgment of others. We are raised to not air our dirty laundry, so to speak. So having been conditioned, and every woman in some way or the other is conditioned to bear the onus of keeping it all together, of connecting, of keeping the family safe and happy. So when a woman dares, like I dared in my imagination, to step out of convention, to break the mold, to step out of the box of my 25-year-old relationship, the first and immediate fear is, of course, how will I be loved? How will I be validated? Will I be ostracized? What will other people say? Because we've been conditioned to be tethered to the opinions of others. So the first thing that comes up when you want to be yourself is the battle between yourself and others. Who am I for others versus who am I for myself? This is the eternal conflict. This is why we don't make big monumental decisions in our lives with courage, because we're always weighing what other people will think and how they will feel versus following our own voice. So how do we negotiate this conflict? With compassion, with consciousness. So that was my second challenge. Okay, I don't want to do this with anger and unconsciousness. I want to be able to own my own sovereignty with right and might, but with compassion. So it took me 2 years to negotiate this. You know, we don't want to be impulsive and reactive. We want to process. So I wanted to process, why was I playing a role for so long? What was the purpose of my role? So my role in my life was to be the savior, to be the ultimate, you know, good girl, to follow the way. And in that, I lost myself. It was not anyone's fault on the outside. It was not even my fault. It was just my conditioning. So women out there should not blame themselves or shame themselves or blame their partners. This is about the awakening of the self. So you have to go through this period of living asleep to wake up. So my fears were about battling the conditioning versus the evolution. And conditioning is always suppressing the authentic self, and the authentic self is longing to come out. So how do we negotiate that? So it took me 2 years of arduous inner work, because I loved everyone in my system, in my old system. I didn't want to just discard them. This is not about discarding anyone. This is about truly divorcing the inauthentic parts of our old life. So that's what I was divorcing. I wasn't divorcing my partner. I was divorcing my own inauthentic self. But culture doesn't have room for that. You know, it says that you're shaming yourself or you're failing. So I had to negotiate those labels within my own being and come to the realization, I'm not doing anything wrong. I haven't failed. I'm actually speaking my truth. So I was getting married to my true self and divorcing my inauthentic self. And that's what marriage and divorce should be about.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I really appreciate that. And I hope it's going to help a lot of people listening, because it's such a strong attachment to that conditioning that feels like that's the right thing and that breaking that is the wrong thing. And especially in the traditions that we're speaking about, what when you start identifying those fears, and you beautifully explained that, like 2 years, can you imagine? I'm just trying to imagine living with something fearful for 2 years, working through that conditioning. What keeps you motivated and inspired in that arduous 2 years of fear, of judgment? What keeps you going at that time?
So all my work has been about claiming the authentic voice. So when I finally woke up, I didn't even know I was not authentic. I was as authentic as my consciousness allowed. And you and I speak about the consciousness quotient. We need to understand that all our quote unquote mistakes in the past were made under a certain consciousness quotient. We should not bemoan or regret or have guilt. So you don't know what you don't know. And until you wake up, you don't know you're asleep. So I didn't know I was asleep till I woke up. The minute I woke up to the fact that I may have been inauthentic and I need to now fly to a different space within my being, what kept me motivated was that goal. How can I live my most true self? All my work has been about chasing that. So I had to really look at, am I able to now hold myself to my greatest standard, which is, am I living my true self? Or am I living a lie? So I did an exercise, and I think people could do this at home.
We'd love that.
Where I committed that I would pay attention to the things that would come out of my mouth. And if in any way it was in the role of good girl or pleaser or being fake because I wanted to avoid conflict, I wouldn't speak.
Wow.
Okay, so I began observing.
Wow.
Let me see how much is a lie. And I literally couldn't speak because everything was tethered to the other person's desires. And it was such a moment of excitement, but also trauma to realize I don't know who I am yet. I'm in my 40s. I'm a mother of a teenager, and I can't access my true voice like this. It takes me so much processing to go, what do I want? So if I am like that, a psychologist, a meditator, I realize there are plenty women out there who are just lost to that inner access. We shouldn't take so long to find out what we want, but because we've placed everyone else before us, our true self gets buried. So that was my chase, was like, dare yourself to go through this dark tunnel. Yes, you will lose relationships. Yes, people will think you're this or that, and defy yourself to untether, to live your true self. So I know now that people may judge me and have ideas about me, but that's not my focus anymore. It is so my inner liberation. So that's my prize. Now has it come at a price? Of course. but I was willing to pay that price for this prize of being free.
Yeah. No, that last line of what you just said of like paying the price for the prize of being free. I mean, that touches me so deeply when you hear that, because it's almost like, yes, the path is painful, but the power that you get to hold at the end of it as your own. But one of the biggest fears, and you mentioned it just there, one of the biggest fears I feel for a lot of women is that they're putting everyone before them. And a lot of women who are seeking their power would go, oh, but I have a child that I'm not sure how they're going to react to it.
Yes.
Or maybe it's almost like, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm totally open to being corrected, but the way I'm observing the fear is, if I stand in my power, that could make my child or someone in my life feel powerless somehow.
Yes.
And that feels like a real fear, because as you said, like women as mothers so often are not thinking about themselves at all.
Yeah.
And so you kind of stay in pain for the benefit of someone else.
I'm so happy you brought that up, because that is one of the most practical mountains before anyone who has a family, if they want to reconfigure the family. Our first concern as women is our children. You know, we've been raised as mothers. We are mothering in nature. So even in my own life, my daughter was my primary concern. And then you're conditioned to feel selfish if you put yourself first, especially women, especially mothers.
100%.
And then there's a whole other practical side of money, which is a big impediment, because the way our culture is set up in these nuclear families, women are not only cut off from their sorority, they don't have other women to count on. They're raising their families alone. They're also cut off from financial power, right? So most of these families have the men in charge of the financial power. So women feel bereft. Then she's not being raised in a tribe anymore. She's not raising her children in a tribe. So now she's alone. So there are many considerations for women why they don't want to reconfigure their family. So how do we negotiate that, right? So of course, if your children are young, if your children are teenagers, all this makes